The flood of Noah, and this is very important to understand the whole issue of creation. You remember the 7 C's of history: creation, corruption, catastrophe, that's Noah's flood, and then confusion, Tower of Babel, then Christ, cross consummation. So we are spending lots of time to understand really the flood. So we divided full lecture about the size of the flood. It is universal, it was global, it covered all the earth, and we have evidence from that by the Bible saying that the water increased by 15 cubits above the high mountains. So if you want to cover one high mountain, you have to cover them all, because this is the physical characteristics of water. And if the flood was a local flood, there is no need to build an ark. The Lord might have said to Noah, leave the land where there will be a flood and go to another area and come back when it is finished. And the other thing is, the aim of the flood is to eliminate all the people and animals and birds outside the ark. So if the flood was local, that means birds can fly to an area where there is no flood. Animals can move to an area where there is no flood. So it is really, physically, it has to be a global flood. Spiritually, it has to be a local flood. And as we'll see tonight when we study the covenant of God after the flood, God said, I'm not going to flood the whole earth again. But from time to time, we have floods in special areas in the world. So God is kept his covenant that he's not going to cover the whole earth with water again, but that doesn't mean there is no local floods from time to time. So today and then last week we studied the ark in detail, the size of the ark, the 3 floors or layers of the ark, and we discovered it is so big and it can contain all these animals. And the animals that the Lord sent to Noah and the birds were according to their kind. And we understood the word kind is meaning the head of the family. So if there are 200 types of dogs, God did not send 200 types of dogs. He sends the wolf at the top with the genetic pool to differentiate into different types of dogs later on. So what we did now is we studied the flood, the size of the flood, and from the way water came and what happened to the water after the flood and all of these issues. And number 2, we studied the ark and the size of the ark, the design of the ark, and all of that. So what we're going to do today is 2 things. We're going to see the geological effects of the flood. And number 2, if we have time, we talk about the covenant of God in chapter 9 in the book of Genesis. So the first picture I'd like to show you is the Grand Canyon. This is a series of mountains, and the Colorado River runs in between them. And I have the privilege to go and visit this place with a group of scientists who took us for a week rafting and studying all these layers. They were talking from the biblical point of view. In geology, we have 2 schools, if you like. One called uniformitarian, which is the same rate of change that we see nowadays, that what's happening now, and they believe that what happened in the past, and they don't accept any catastrophe. In the Christian view, we believe in catastrophic geology. The fountains of the deep were opened, and there was volcanic eruptions, and the crust of the earth was broken, and that's why we have the Grand Canyon. So in geology, we're studying the same layers, but we interpret them differently depending on the starting point. So we believe in catastrophic geology. That's why we are spending lots of time understanding Noah's flood from the biblical point of view and from the scientific point of view. So if you see the river of Colorado River running in Arizona, this is the Grand Canyon, and it is chains of mountains with different colors and different fossils in them. But one of the things is there are, on the top here, you find marine fossils. So that means this top was covered by water at some stage, and the water receded and went back to form this river. Because this marine fossils will not go by stairs or by a lift to be fossilized at the top here. That cannot happen. That means the top of the mountain was covered at some stage with water, and water receded to form the river and the fossils in the top. So some people say this is a local catastrophe here. But if you go to the Himalaya, you find in India, you find that it is the same idea. At the top of Himalaya, you find marine fossils. That means the Himalaya was covered. But let me explain something. The Himalaya is one of the highest mountains on the earth. And people say Noah's flood could not cover the Himalaya. We believe the Himalaya was formed during the flood due to the tectonic plates of the Arabia and tectonic plates of India hit each other and formed the Himalaya. The tectonic plates is the structure of the crust of the earth. And these plates are moving. They can move away from each other. They can move towards each other. They can move and hit each other and form mountains. So these are issues that always the skeptics arise these questions about the flood and the height of the mountains. So this is, you can, if you see the river Colorado running between these chains of mountains, you have two explanations. One explanation, you can say, this is long time, millions and millions of years, and the river, as it runs between the chain of the mountains, cuts through the mountain gradually, slowly. But by the way, there is no power that can cut the mountain like this with very high mountains, the chain of mountains in the Grand Canyon. So these people who believe in the uniformitarian idea, the same rate of change, they believe there are millions of years to form the mountains of the Grand Canyon. But you can look at the same mountain and say, lots of water and little time. Massive amount of water which came from the subterranean water from underneath the crust of the earth and caused all these mountains to form, and the river runs after that between the mountains. So we are observing the same thing, but our understanding is completely different depending on if you believe in Noah's flood or not. That's why we are spending hours and hours in our study of Noah's flood, because it has an effect on the geological layers of the earth, and at the same time, it has great effect on the fossils as well, on the dinosaurs and other things. So that's why we are spending 3 lectures at least to discuss this very important topic. Any questions at that stage? No? Right, let's continue then. Right, what evidence of a catastrophic flood would we expect if there is a catastrophic event that happened like this? What are the evidence of that? Okay, so what we can see is the following. Yeah, oh, it's not changing. Yeah, ocean waters flooded over the continents, right? So as we said, the continents were one continent called Pangaea connected to each other with the different continents coming together. And the ocean waters increased and flooded this earth. We find rapid burial of creature and plants because, as we said, fossilization is a rapid procedure. It is not a long time procedure. So when a fish dies in the sea, it doesn't go down to the bottom of the sea and get fossilized. What happened if it dies? It floats and then it decays and is eaten. When it's going to be fossilized, if there is enough mud full of minerals and pressure and temperature, so pre-mineralization, that means the elements, the calcium and magnesium, will enter into the bones and make them like a solid structure, which is called the fossil. So if there is a universal flood, That means, or global flood, that means we have rapid burial of creatures and plants together. And some of the, what we call grave fossils, you find creatures which don't live together, but they are buried together because the flood water and the mud took them and buried them in this particular location. So they don't live together, but they were buried together. And that's a very interesting study about the grave fossils. We find what is spread deposition of strata. That strata mean the layers of the earth. You find they are widely spread because they are moving from one area to another. So they are deposited. So you find this chain of mountains which are extended from America and to Europe and to the Middle East. There is a continuation of some layers because of the movements of the water of the flood. You find long distance of sediment transport. That means there is mud moved from one place to another on a long distance because the water moved this amount of mud. Rapid or no erosion between strata, and I'll explain all of that again. When the layers are deposited, if they are exposed for millions of years, that means the surface of this layer will be changing. But in the Grand Canyon, you find that the layers are smooth one after the other. I'll explain all of that again with different pictures, okay? Rapid succession of strata. So this is a section of the Grand Canyon. These are the different layers here, and this is called the South Rim, and there is a big canyon here. There is a big river runs in here, okay? So they think this is millions of years that formed this. On the surface here on the top, you find lots of changes because it's exposed to the atmosphere, and there are areas which is raised and areas which is low down, and lots of changes on the surface. But in these layers, you find as if they are cut, when you cut in a cake with different layers of chocolate and other things, it is very smooth. So if you cut through the layers here, the top, as I said, there are lots of changes. And they think this lower part formed 300 million years ago. But actually, you see this arrow? When you cut through these layers, I'll try to show it again. When you cut through the layers of the Grand Canyon, as if you are cutting through a cake with different layers, and it's very smooth. There is no changes between this surface and the surface above it and the surface above it and the surface above it. There is, if it is millions of years, that means this surface was laid, say, 500 million years ago, and then 400 million years, the layer above it, and 300 million, and go on. So that means if that is exposed for 100 million years, that means there will be changes here on the top of this layer. But in actual fact, you don't find these changes. So that means it was deposited rapidly. Why there are different layers? Because the particles are different and the speed of water is different. So that's why it is deposited in several layers. Okay? Right. We'll come to an area called Hermit Formation, and this is called Coconino Sandstone. Don't worry about the names. I visited this place actually, and I remember it. So in Hermit Formation here, you find a special type of mud, but the Coconino Sandstone is completely different. So they believe there are 5 to 10 million years between these two layers. The uniformitarian geologists believe that there is 5 to 10 million years. Can you imagine the number? And from the number itself, you know it is an estimate because it is 5 to 10 million. So it's, is it 5 or it is 7 or it's 9 or it's 10? There is big difference between 5 million and 6 million and 10 million. But the range that is given here is 5 to 10 million years gap between the sedimentation of the Coconino Sandstone and the Hermit Formation. But you find that the line between them is very smooth. You can see that on the screen, yeah? So the line is very, very smooth. If it is exposed for 5 to 10 million years, you expect a lot of changes on this line because the atmosphere. Do you know when you have a piece of land which is not built, you find there are plants developing and there are different things happening because it is exposed to the atmosphere. So if the Hermit Formation and the Coconino Sandstone, the line between them is very smooth, as you can see on this. And this is a real picture, actually. It is a real picture of the whole thing. So that means it is deposited very quickly at the same time with different speed of particles and different content of particles. So that is sandstone and that is Hermit Formation, which is different, but they are all mud. They are all moved from the crust of the earth during the flood. So that's really, there is another important thing is you find some fossils among many strata meaning layer. So look at this layer here, and this layer here, and this layer here, and so on to the top. You find a tree, a stem of the tree. If that is really happened over, that means it is buried very quickly. Because if it is really happened over millions of years, that means this tree will be in that position, and one layer is formed in 1 million years, and then another million years to form the next, and another million years to form the third, and so on. That means this really will rot. The tree will rot, will dissolve. But that means this picture shows that the tree was buried very quickly, and different layers of mud developed very, very, very quickly through the water of the flood. So this is called multi-strata fossils, and it's one of the evidence of rapid deposition of these layers. I know that geology is a difficult subject because we didn't really learn geology in the school, and I didn't learn all of that till I studied the subject. But I think it is important to understand the basics of these pictures. And I'll send them to Dr. Bassem, and he will put them on the website. And please go back and listen to the lecture and look at the slides so it refresh your mind. It took me a long time to understand this and to be confident in explaining it. So don't worry if it is new information to you today, okay? Right, there is another thing really, which is this rock is bent like this. You see the layers transverse like this, and then goes vertical like this. So that bent in the rock. Yes, you can break the rocks, but that needs massive power to do that. But if you break the rocks, you have fracture lines. But in this rock, there is no fracture lines. And I visited that place actually. And it is a massive rock. Compare this to the size of the people here. I hope you can see that on the screen. These are the size of the people here visiting. And this is the size of the rock. So it is bent like this. I'll show you that again. Look, there are deposition on the transverse and deposition vertical. So that means this rock was soft when it is bent like this, because the solid rock, you can't break them. You can if you use massive, massive force to break them. But this massive force will produce crack lines, fissure lines. There are no fissure lines here at all. So that is the size of the people, and that's the size of the rock. And as I said, I visited this place personally. So this is the curvature here between the two types of rocks here called Mave limestone and Temple Butte limestone. And they think there are about 120 million years difference, or 140 million years missing. Again, if there are missing years, and this line is very, very smooth, as you can see here. So if there is 140 million years between these two layers, that means this line will be irregular, and there will be different plants and other things developing on the surface here because it is exposed to the atmosphere. But when you go and visit this place, it is not like that. So back to this here, that's Coconino sandstone. We spoke about this, and I'm bringing it again just to show you that the line is very straight. So you can't accommodate 5 to 10 million years here at all. But the geologists, the uniformitarian geologists who don't believe the Bible, they don't accept Noah's flood. They think that there is at least 5 million years. They said 5 to 10 million years between Coconino sandstone and Hermit Formation. Just to confirm all of that again, look at the line here. There are two different rocks, so they are deposited differently, but they are deposited at the same time, and the curvature here proves that it was very soft when it is molded in that picture, right? So there is no 120 million years. I'll let you watch this video about Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is Washington State, not Washington, D.C. And a volcanic eruption happened in May 1980, and then in June 1981. And as a result of the eruption, the lava came on and formed canyon, a small canyon, like the Grand Canyon, but on a smaller scale. And it was formed, some layers were deposited within hours. It doesn't take millions of years. And the whole thing really formed within 12 years. And remember that because I'll tell you about the isotopes in a minute, when they took samples from this mountain and sent it to the laboratory, and then we'll see the results. But let us watch the film first. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I'll go back, but this is Tom Vail. That was the leader of our journey, actually, our mission. And this is the mountain color, and this is the curvature, right? Just to show you the break of the thing, right? Now, this is the film, I think. No, where is the film? No, I'll press properly. Yeah, it's 2 seconds. I'll listen to it. So this is a picture, right? Sorry, I will not be able to show you the film just now. So that's Tom Vail, and this is the bending of the rock. That means it was soft when it was bent because there are no fracture lines. So what happened when they formed this canyon? That's Mount St. Helens. The Christian creationist geologist took samples of the mountain here and sent it to the laboratory and said, please tell us, how old is this mountain? Okay, that's the question. And they didn't tell them anything more than that. So the analysis came by radiometric dating 340,000 years to 2.8 million years. Can you imagine that? And it actually was formed within 12 years. So we observed this canyon. This is the canyon here, series of mountains on both sides. So they took some of the lava here and they sent it to the laboratory, and they didn't tell them that the age is 12 years. And the laboratory came back, the radiometric age was 340,000 years to 2.8 million. Even if you look at these figures, this is a big range. Is it 340,000 or 1 million or 2 million or 2.8 million? This is a big range. That's why the radiometric dating depends on many assumptions. And if you use different methods, you get different results. So it is not an accurate measurement, like when you check your blood and this is 15 gram of hemoglobin. That's a fixed number. It's not a range. It gives you an exact number. That's completely different when you talk about the radiometric dating, the carbon-14. By the way, carbon-14 cannot measure this at all. Carbon-14 measures thousands of years, not millions of years. The millions of years are measured by potassium argon, and uranium lead. The uranium is decayed into lead, and the potassium is decayed into argon. And then you can measure the half-life and lots of difficult calculation to come to the age of a rock. But what I wanted to say here is, from Mount St. Helens, they took samples of a recent eruption, and the mountain was formed within 12 years, or less than 12 years. And the age of the rock that's given is 340,000 to 2.8 million years old. Yeah, that's the film, sorry. You can watch that now.
On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens, located 95 miles south of Seattle, Washington, erupted. The eruption was triggered by an earthquake centered beneath the mountain that measured 5.1 on the Richter scale. The lateral blast swept out the north side of Mount St. Helens at 300 miles per hour. With temperatures as high as 660 degrees Fahrenheit and the power of 24 megatons of thermal energy, it snapped 100-year-old trees like toothpicks and stripped them of their bark. Before the famous eruption at Mount St. Helens, scientists were mostly familiar with slow-acting examples of geologic change. But at Mount St. Helens, geologists watched the Earth's surface change quite rapidly. Icebergs were buried in hot avalanche material. They melted and formed badlands in days. Eruptions on May 18 and June 10 produced fine layers in hours. On June 10, mud flows cut zigzag canyons 100 feet deep in soft sand and mud, complete with perpendicular side canyons. Canyons that are reminiscent of the geography of Grand Canyon, only 40 times smaller and clearly produced within hours. Mud flows over the following decade cut hundreds of feet into solid rock in just days of cutting time. Fallen trees formed a log mat on the surface of Spirit Lake and dropped bark to the bottom of the lake, accumulating up to 3 feet of bark peat in just a couple years. And vertical floating logs sinking to the bottom of the lake resulted in buried trees in only a decade, similar to the trees of Yellowstone's fossil forest, which are also buried in volcanic layers. Even though Mount St. Helens is a very small catastrophe compared to the flood or the major catastrophes immediately following the flood, it provides a better clue to what happened in those times than the slow geologic processes which are most commonly seen in the present.
Okay, so that's the film explaining the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington State. And that was in May 1980, and another eruption in June 1981. And the formation of all these layers happened very quickly, and some of them within hours. And the whole canyon, that is the whole chain of mountains, were formed within 12 years. And the estimate from the biopsy, from the sample, was 340,000 years to 2.8 million years. So that just confirms that the radiometric dating, that's the things that depending on the decay of matter, is not accurate as people claim that it is. Okay, let me talk very quickly about the fossils. And the fossils, as we said, it has to be a rapid process. It is not a prolonged procedure, because if you leave a dead body, it will decay. So I'll give you a few examples, and then we will move into the covenant of God in chapter 9 in Genesis. So this is the dragonfly. They believe it is 200 million years old. This is the fossil. It's a real fossil. This is not a picture. It's a fossil of dragonfly with these 4 wings. But it is exactly the same dragonfly that we see nowadays. So according to them, it took 200 million years. So there is no change within 200 million years at all. So it is constant from the fossil record and from the real life. So what happened during 200 million years? Nothing at all. The evolutionists will not accept that because they believe that everything is changed, especially with 200 million years old. This is an ant, Namla, 100, excuse me, 135 million years old. It is exactly like the ants we see nowadays. This is another genus of ants. They believe it is extinct 15 to 20 million years ago. Was found alive in 2006. Exactly the same ant, the same insect, with no changes at all. So they believe that it was extinct, it was disappeared 15 to 20 million years ago. So that means these millions of years are assumptions. They are not real measurements. They are just assumptions. Wollomie pine, that's a very interesting discovery. They believe this is just a tree. And Wollomie pine, it went extinct 150 million years ago. That's what they believe from the fossil record, that it was extinct. It is not available anymore. And they give it the distance 150 million years ago. It's a long, long time, huh? But it was found alive in 1994. So, and it is exactly the same as the fossil structure here. So what happened during 100 and assumed 150 million years ago? There are no changes at all. So that's a major problem for the evolutionists who think that these layers and the fossils were formed gradually. This is a very interesting one. This is a fish called coelacanth. So the coelacanth, they believe it was extinct with the dinosaurs. So they think 65 million years ago, no coelacanth fossils live anymore. So that is the coelacanth. And in 1938, they discovered the coelacanth was alive in Madagascar, and now it is in Japan water. And you can go to a restaurant and eat the coelacanth fish, which they thought it is extinct from the fossil record 65 million years ago. That's just to show you that it depends how you understand the fossils and how would you understand the layers of the earth. And that's why it is very, very important to spend time understanding Noah's flood. If we understand Noah's flood, we'll understand the full picture of creation. We will talk in the future lectures. We're hoping to finish by early April. So we will have a full time talking about the days of creation, and are the ages of time millions of years or just 24 hours. All of this will be understood properly if we understand Noah's flood. So it wasn't really 65 million years ago. That is called dawn redwood fossils. Again, they thought that this tree is extinct 248 to 265 million years ago, found alive in 1943. This is another animal, it's called mountain monkey, was thought to have gone extinct 11 million years ago until recently found alive. So it's called rock rat. Died 11 million years ago, and in 1996 it was found alive. It's called coelacanth of the rodents. Rodents اللي هي القوارض. So you find an example from trees, you find examples from insects, you find examples from rodents, you find examples from fish, and all the timing that's given to them is completely wrong. So it depends how you see the fossils and how you see the layers. If you believe in catastrophic geology, that's the flood of Noah, that's completely different from when you think of uniformitarian or there is no change or no catastrophe at all. Horseshoe crab, the crab, they thought it is 190 million years ago. And they found living crab today very similar to what is in the fossils. So really, there is two major problems with the evolution thinking. When you look at the layers of, this is diagram, obviously, this is not real fossils, what you are seeing now on the screen. So when you see these layers represented by these pictures, this is not fossils at all. There are two problems. Abrupt appearance. So that means you dig in this layer and you find frogs. You dig in this layer you find horse. You find a full horse. You don't find intermediates of horses to come to this mature one, okay? So that's called abrupt appearance. It appeared all of a sudden and it appeared complete, right? Without any precursors, without any sort of development. And the other problem is called stasis. That means it is stayed as a frog, it stayed as a frog. This type of frog is still available now. So they think it is in a layer millions and millions of years old. But in actual fact, it is very similar to the frogs that we have nowadays. So that really explains to all of us that all of these things really are exactly the same as we have them today. So this is the problem with the layers of the rocks, and the other problem is the abrupt appearance and stasis. That's creation after their own kind. So I hope I covered this area reasonably well, and I tried to simplify it as much as I could. Any questions before we move into the covenant of God after the flood? Any questions about the flood?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding the layers of the earth or the.
Yeah.
Okay, during the flood, when it was occurring, we find the layers are like separated from each other, like they are distinct.
Yes.
But when you think
Yes.
about it, it was a mess. Like it was everything mixed together and going like from here to there. And how come they are not mixed in layers? Like in the layers, they are not mixed together. Like they should have been one entity, but have different kind of like components or like metals and mud and everything together.
Yeah, right. It all depends on the speed of water and on the structure of the mud. So if you have mud like different particles with different size and shape, and you have different speed of water, because this water is not just very quiet and depositing everything at the same time. It's not like that. It is speed of water in different areas, with areas of volcanic eruption and areas of deposition, and then another change. So because of the speed of water and different size of particles and characteristics of the particles, you have different layers. Like this Coconino sandstone, that's a sandstone that's fine particles, and the Hermit Formation is a different style. And when you put them together and press them, that gives you the layers. And then there is some iron, so it can be oxidized and gives you the red color. So it depends on the components and the speed of deposition, and that's why you have the layers in different shape. And in some other examples, there is a mixture, as you said. What you said is absolutely right as well. In other examples, the aim of the examples that I showed you today is to show you that there is no changes between the layers. But in others, you find a mixture of big particles like the pebbles, الوزلط, And it is not just mix it together, zalata جنب zalata, right? There is a mud in between. So it is like, عارفة الخرسانة, there is zalat and asmant, and they are mixed together. There are pictures of that as well. So what you are saying, yes, there is example of what you have said, and there is example of layers as I have explained today. Both are explainable by the speed of water and by the change of the size of the particles. Is that okay or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. More or less.
Right. Okay.
Okay. I have
any
another
other question.
Yeah, I have another question.
Yeah.
The fossils, like all the fossils that we find, are mainly from the time of the flood, right? Like we don't. There is no fossils forming after that time. Am I right? Or?
No, I agree. Yeah, it's mostly, but remember there are catastrophic events that happened in the world from time to time, and that can create fossils, right? So we have fossils happens if there is death and rapid burial. These are the two essential components, death and rapid burial. So there are rapid burial in the ice, for example, like the mammoth. So what I'm saying here, since Adam sinned and there is death in the world, there are small amount of fossils. The main amount of fossils is during the flood, and the post-flood catastrophes can cause fossils as well. Yeah, go ahead. So
no,
what's your question then?
Yeah, my question was, you just answered the question.
Answered the question, right? Okay.
Yeah, we find.
So that's fine.
But,
I have a nice diagram actually, Soha, which is explaining the geological column, right? And we have the small part at the bottom, which is pre-flood, and mainly in the flood, and there is a post-flood a small amount as well. Yeah, good. Good. Any other questions? So we all happy about this? I know this is probably too much information, but please, if you have time, go back to the website and listen to it again. It took me long time to understand these things, by the way. And I have to repeat it and read it and repeat it and read it because we are not really well taught in geology at all in all our education. So if it is an interest of yours, please go and study again and put some more effort into it. So you have solid understanding of the subject, because this is a battleground, really a big battleground, right? So the geologists who believe in uniformitarian, you can say to them there is abrupt appearance of creatures, just appear. There is no precursor, there is no development from a primitive type to a complicated type. And the other thing is the stasis. They stay as the same from the time they are seen in the layers to what we have now as the examples that I gave you of millions of years. They believe this ant was extinct 120 million years ago, and it is available today at the same picture, same structure. So what happened during 120 million years? There is no evolution, there is no change. Yeah? Good. Any other questions? Okay, good. Right, in the coming 10-15 minutes, what we're going to do, we will open our Bibles in Genesis chapter 9. And these are the events after the flood. Remember how long is the flood? The time that Noah stayed in the ark? I need an answer. How long Noah? Sorry, say it again.
371 days.
Wonderful, Riyadh. Yes, 371 days. So let us see what happened after they came out of the ark, and they came out according to the order of the Lord. He put them in and he ordered them to come out. And then he asked them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And Noah offered sacrifices to God from the clean animals that he had. And that is the end of chapter 8 in Genesis. Now I'd like to go to chapter 9, please. And that's a very interesting, really, chapter to study. Right. Can anybody read from verse 1 to verse 7? Anyone to read, please?
And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered.
Right. Let us stop here, Basim.
Okay.
Thank you. Let us stop here. We'll stop from in different stages, but verse 2 is very interesting because God is giving the authority again to man. Remember, God gave the authority to Adam to name the animals and to have dominion over everything, really, because he's the top of the creation. And that means a control. It doesn't mean he will be dictatorial and kill everything. No, not at all. He will look after the earth and he will be a good steward of the earth, right? So after the flood, God is giving the same authority to Noah and his descendants. And that's very important, right? Because God blessed Noah and his sons and their families. So this is the authority of the humans over creatures and creation. And God covered all the animals, all the birds, everything on the earth, everything in the sea. So that means the dominion of man over the creation of God. Right, verse 3, please. Anybody to read?
Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh
Right.
with... Okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah, carry on, please, till the end of the verse.
But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood.
Right, okay. Right, so that's a very important change here in verse 3. Remember what was the food of the man and animals and birds in Genesis chapter 1? What was it? Can we remember? From chapter 1, verse 29 to 31. What is the initial food of Adam and Eve and all the animals?
Plants.
Sorry?
Plants.
Plant, that's right, exactly. And that's very important because there was no death. So Adam cannot kill a chicken and have it for lunch because there was no death. But some people say, okay, if you take a plant, if you take a fruit from a plant, you are killing the plant. No, not really. Because the life of the plant is different from the life of humans and animals and birds. Because they don't have blood. And the soul of the person is in the blood. So that means if you kill, the plants are mainly a packages of energy to be consumed by humans so we can develop energy. The energy comes from the sun, but I can't really sit under the sun and get fed. This energy is taken by the plant and it is formed in the form of fruit or stem or whatever we are eating. And then I eat these plants and it is metabolized in my body and gives me energy, okay? So that was the system before the fall of Adam and Eve. After the flood, the Lord is changing the diet of humans and saying to them, you can eat now the killed animals and fish, but he will put a condition in verse 5 saying it is not the sophisticated animals with the blood inside the flesh. It has to be bled, right? So that is important for eating the meat. So there is nothing wrong of eating meat now, but it has to be slaughtered properly, and the blood is shed completely from the creature. See how the Bible is very accurate, and it's beautiful really to understand these things. I'm sure initially I just bypassed it and I didn't really give it any attention. But when I learned about the creation and I studied this in detail with answers in Genesis, these are very important points to note: the change of the diet after the flood. Right? Would you please continue, Bassem, from verse 5 onward?
And for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast, I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Verse 6, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image.
Right, that's very important. So now God said, life is so precious. And God said, I have created man and woman on my image. So anyone who thinks to kill another person, the punishment of this person should be killed. That's the capital punishment. That means it is something to prohibit us from attempting to kill anybody else, because the value of a life is so, so precious. And that is really very important. I know lots of countries don't have capital punishment now. I understand that. And lots of people were judged really wrongly and they were killed without really committing the crime that they are supposed to have done. I know about the mistakes of applying this rule. But the aim of this rule is to prohibit us from killing other humans, because we are made on God's image. And that's the value of life. That is really beautiful and important. And the Lord said, if you shed the blood of man, the Lord will revenge, and really you should be punished again and you should be killed. But verse 7, can you read please the Bassem for us? Verse 7. Verse 7.
Okay, and you be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it.
Right. So the Lord wants to flourish the earth again, and people will get married and they will multiply and they will increase the population. That apply to the humans and animals and plants as well. Right? Okay. Now we are going to study the covenant itself.
Then God said to Noah.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living.
Just stop here. Yeah, I will stop here for a minute, please, Bassem. Right, so now the covenant is with whom? Noah and his sons and all their descendants. So that's very important to know who is the component of this covenant. God is going to give a promise, and he's saying that's for you, for your descendants. And then he will continue in verse 10. Would you read 10, please, for us, Bassem?
And with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark, it is for every beast of the earth.
Wow. So the covenant of God is with Noah, his sons, their descendants, with the animals, with the birds, with all the creatures that came out of the ark. Because in the component of this covenant, there will be no universal flood again. So that is really very important to know the parties of this covenant. God is one side, and the covenant is Noah, his sons, their descendants, with the animals, with the birds, with everything that lives on the earth, everything that came out from the ark. Right. Verse 11, please.
I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth.
Right. So what is the covenant now? There is no global
flood.
flood again. Right?
Okay.
To destroy every flesh. That is the covenant of God. And God keeps his covenant. But from time to time, we have a local flood in Bangladesh, for example, and thousands of people will die. But that's not universal. So God still kept his promise. You see the point?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the evidences that the Noah's flood was global. It affected the whole earth. It was not a local. Because if it was a local flood, that means God is breaking the covenant now because there are local floods now. You see how all of that is coming together now? I hope. Right. Verse 12, please.
And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth."
Right. We'll stop here.
Okay.
Thanks, Basim. Right. So this now the covenant, we understood the covenant is there is no universal flood again, no global flood. But there is a sign of the covenant. So the sign is the ark, the rainbow. The rainbow is a normal phenomena. That means when the sun rays come in the water particles, it acts like a prism and it analyzes the components of light into the 7 components, and that's what gives us the rainbow, the color of the rainbow. So this is a normal phenomena. But God is using a normal phenomena to be a sign of a covenant. So the rainbow is not the covenant, it is the sign of the covenant, which is very important actually to understand. And God is not using a miraculous sign because the miracle is not a repeated sign. It is an extraordinary intervention of God into his creation. But God is using a normal phenomena to be a sign. And the sign is to reassure man. So God, when he says, when I put my bow in the sky, I will remember my covenant. The word here, remember, means put it into effect. It doesn't mean God is going to forget. He will never do that. But it is there so it will be reassuring to men, women, and animals that there is no general flood or universal flood after any rain that will come our way later on. I think that's a wonderful chapter. Please go back and read it. Take time to understand it. Right? Continue, Basim min fadlak. Yeah.
Verse 14.
Verse 14.
When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the cloud, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow...
Right, that's what we said. Yeah. So that's what we just said, that the Lord put this sign of the covenant, which is the rainbow, and the rainbow really is to assure man that God is not going to flood the whole universe again. Verse 16.
When the bow is in the clouds, I will set it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all the flesh that is on the earth."
Wonderful. So now we have a covenant, we have a sign of a covenant, we have change of diet after the flood, and this is, I think, very important. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm talking about myself, I used to read these chapters and I didn't understand really what it meant. But I hope through these lectures, and now I'm hoping that you as a group now understood the flood and the effect of the flood, and that will help you to be well established in your faith. Right, so that's our lecture finished today, but any questions before we say goodbye?
Yes, Doctor, please.
Yes.
Just want to know, what is the importance or what is the reason to change the the food for the human beings that God did here with Noah. I mean,
Right.
why do we eat animals' meat after the flood? What is the difference? What is the
Yeah,
importance?
that's right. That's a very good question. Right. The Bible doesn't tell us an answer to this question, ya Magid. But some people suggested that there was not enough resources for people to eat because you need time for the plants to flourish again after the flood.
Okay.
So that's another source of meeting, of food for humans. That's one explanation, but the Bible doesn't tell us why. But this is what had happened, really. So when the Bible is not clear in the reason, I am always shy to put my own understanding then to explain things. So all what we know is there is a change of diet, and that's it. But people, the commentator said because of the resources of the plant material was limited. But I don't see that as a big reason, really. So the answer to your question, we don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Yes.
Yes.
It was the same for animals. Like before the flood, they didn't eat meat, like the lions
Yeah,
and
that's
the
very good. No, no, that's different because after the fall of Adam and Eve, the animals became carnivorous, some of them. So they started to eat each other because there was killing. Remember Cain and Abel? So there was killing after the fall. And we think that animals started to eat each other and became carnivorous after the fall, not after they came out of the flood. So because there was death in the universe because of the sin of Adam. So that's part of the curse. So for
Okay.
animals, no, it was after Adam's fall, not after the flood. Good question. Right. Any others? Right. Okay. Please
One
go
last
back and
question.
yeah, go. No, ask
Sorry.
as many as you like. No, go ahead. I like your question. Go ahead. Yeah.
When did dinosaurs die? If they were
Right.
in the ark,
Yeah. Yes. And the
why
aim of
don't
the
we
ark
see them
was
now?
their family. Yes, absolutely. But it's not only dinosaurs. There are plenty of animals where were extinct. Dinosaurs is the most famous. But why there is extinction? Because we're living in a fallen world. That's the answer. But dinosaurs, if we have time in the course, I'll have a full lecture about dinosaurs. So we'll discuss that in detail. But it's not only dinosaurs, Yasaha. There are many, many, many hundreds and thousands of animals are extinct. They are not there anymore. Something like the dodo and others. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm waiting.
No, I mean, maybe we focus on dinosaurs because they were huge and big and they were totally different than all other kinds of animals. So maybe that's why we see them as something important to understand.
Big. Absolutely. But I will leave that to my full lecture on dinosaurs because you need to understand lots of things about them to explain this. But extinction is one of the characteristics of a fallen world. And the word dinosaur, by the way, is a modern word by Richard Owens in 1841, and it means horrible lizard. So they are part of the lizards, they are reptiles. And some dinosaurs are young and small, not all of them like T-Rex, because dinosaurs hatch from an egg like a football-sized egg. So the small dinosaurs which just came out will be the size of a chicken, and some of them are the size of a sheep, and then they can grow up. So that's just to whet your appetite for our lecture about dinosaurs, but there are much, much more information that we need to communicate to understand this.
Okay,
right?
I have a question.
Okay.
Last question.
Osama, yeah.
The way God describes how to kill animals to eat, is it what we call now halal?
Halal meat, yes.
It's just halal meat. Is the same that way as Muslim come with the idea from the Bible?
Yes, it is actually taken from the Jews. So that's the Jewish.
Okay.
The Jewish and the Muslims eat halal meat, and actually, what happened, what we eat now is halal as well. But what happened in the big Magzara Kbira, what they do, they hit them with something to keep them sort of anesthetized in a sense, and then they kill them and they shed their blood as well. So, but
Okay.
yeah. So it is halal in general, actually, but the ritual halal is the Jewish and the Muslims, yes. And the Muslims took it from the Jew, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So I'll leave you, but next week, God willing, we'll continue. And then we will have an extra session on Saturday, the 14th. And then we'll start talk about the days. Probably I'll take you through the dinosaurs as well, because I think that's important. And I think the next lecture will be the Tower of Babel and the distribution of people and animals after the flood. And then on the 14th, we will talk more about probably dinosaurs or days of creation, because I'm hoping to finish before Easter. And really, I know you are all busy and I understand that, but please go back and listen to these lectures, go back to the website. I send the slides to Basim usually the following day, and Basim is very, very good. And thank you, Basim, for all your help.
Welcome, sir. Thank you.
Put them, no, really, I mean, we don't take that for granted, Basim. You are doing a great job for all of us. Really, you are.
Thank you, Doctor.
So,
thank you for your help.
no, that's true. And we appreciate that, yeah, Basim. Without you and without your vision, we won't be doing what we are doing now.
Thank you, Doctor.
But so I send the slides to Basim and he kindly puts them quickly on the website. Please put some more effort. I know you are very committed, you are busy, and I appreciate all of you. But this is a very demanding course. And if we understand this, we'll be very strong Christians. So God help you and bless you. Okay? Right. Good night, and I'll see you next Thursday.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.